at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live Thursday, November 21st. I'm Dean Obeidallah. It might be impeachment time, but I'm still the needy Muslim guy hoping to be your MBFF on Twitter. So, my friends, yesterday Gordon Sondland, devastating. But more happened today. But some things happened last night, and I want to get into that a little bit first. And we'll get into the testimony today of Fiona Hill and Dave Holmes, which was just, it was riveting. It was a masterclass in how to testify. And it was a horrible day for Republicans on the Hill. If there was a mercy rule, we would have seen it applied to them because it was not pretty. But last night, there a few important things happened. There was testimony last night of Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Laura Cooper and David Hale, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. And they both made 2 points, fact points, that are very important. And one is we've learned very clearly, I'll tell you the three big takeaways. We keep hearing from the Republicans that aid was withheld by Donald Trump for 55 days, like that doesn't matter. In reality, what we learned from David Hale last night, the aid was withheld from June 21st, so an extra month here. And who knows before that? That's at the very least, it was held from June 21st to September 11th. But more importantly, we learned a couple of other things. One is the GOP claim over and over and over that when Donald Trump was speaking to the Ukrainian President Zelensky on the phone July 25th, the Ukrainians had no idea the aid was being withheld. So how could there be pressure if they don't know the aid's being withheld? I never subscribed to that view, but that's destroyed. That's done. I'll play a clip in a second to get to that. And third, Donald Trump's argument that he was all about corruption and wanted to root out corruption in the Ukraine before he released money. We all knew that was BS. But now it's even more so. The testimony of Laura Cooper is that the Defense Department had certified in May that Ukraine had engaged in systematic anti-corruption measures to the point where they had been certified to receive aid from the United States military. So, done. It was over. So here we go. Here is Deputy Assistant Laura Cooper testifying. And what's really important, by the way, the aid being withheld, there's no dispute in the testimony that the aid was withheld by Mick Mulvaney at the direction of Donald Trump. That's been testified by various people. So there's really no dispute that this is a Donald Trump action, all of it. But here is Laura Cooper last night talking about the aid being withheld. And when she mentions FMF is foreign military financing. So that's the military aid. So she says State Department aid here and military aid here. But her big point is on July 25th, the same day as the phone call between Trump and Zelensky, the Ukrainians reached out to State Department officials and said, by the way, where's our aid? Because we kind of need this aid. Let's hear clip number one, please.
On July 25th, a member of my staff got a question from a Ukraine embassy contact asking what was going on with Ukraine security assistance. Because at that time, we did not know what the guidance was on USAI. The OMB notice of apportionment arrived that day, but the staff member did not find out about it until later. I was informed that the staff member told the Ukrainian official that we were moving forward on USAI, but recommended that the Ukraine embassy check in with state regarding the FMF.
And again, FMF is the foreign military financing. That's the military aid that they were desperate for. To remind everyone, as Colonel Vindman testified, our military aid to the Ukraine comprises of 10% of their total military budget. They desperately need this. They're in a hot war with with Russia, at least Russian-backed separatists on their eastern border, and they're losing one Ukrainian a week on average and wounding many others. So they were needed this aid. And think about it. We're in July. It's like, where's the aid? It's supposed to come early in the year. So you have that. Secondly, here's Congressman Jim Himes from Connecticut, who I think did a really good job in these hearings, very calm and measured, fact-based. Here he is talking to Laura Cooper about the anti-corruption reforms of Ukraine and how they got certified to receive this aid, which just decimates any argument about corruption in the Ukraine holding up this aid. Here's clip number 2.
Corruption. It wants to ensure that American foreign assistance is spent wisely and does not worsen corruption. And so when Congress authorized this money, it built in conditions, just as Mr. Ratcliffe suggested. By law, Ukraine wouldn't get all the money until it demonstrated that it had undertaken substantial anti-corruption reforms. Ms. Cooper, under the law, the Department of Defense works with the State Department and other agencies to establish anti-corruption benchmarks and determine whether Ukraine has sufficiently met those benchmarks, correct?
That's correct. That provision pertains to the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative.
And that's a legally specified process. That's not the president in the Oval Office manifesting a general skepticism of foreign aid, right? That's a process.
It is a congressionally mandated process, yes, sir.
So did that process take place for the DoD funding that was held up in July?
Sir, the process that took place for the certification took place prior to the May certification to the U.S. Congress.
So, right. Not only did it take place before, as required by law, but months before President Trump froze the money, the Department of Defense, in consultation with state, sent a letter to Congress certifying, and you said this in your opening statement, the government of Ukraine has taken substantial actions to make defense institutional reforms for the purposes of decreasing corruption, increasing accountability, and sustaining improvements of combat capability enabled by U.S. assistance. So by the time President Trump froze the aid, the Department of Defense had spent weeks, if not months, determining that the Ukrainian government met every requirement in the law and made significant strides in combating corruption. Is that correct?
That is correct. We made that determination in May.
So this wasn't about corruption. The timeline proves it.
So very clear there. It was about the aid. The Ukrainians knew about the aid. On the July 25th phone call with Trump, they understood they didn't have it. They didn't know where it was. Hence, there's even more pressure on President Zelensky. Second, the corruption argument is destroyed. And here's Eric Swalwell in 30 seconds on the committee yesterday, putting them both together, going, this destroys both of the GOP defenses. Clip number 3.
Ms. Cooper, your testimony today destroys two of the pillars of the president's defense and one justification for his conduct. First pillar, no harm, no foul. The Ukrainians didn't know that the hold was in place, so didn't really hurt them. Second pillar, this president was a real champion of anti-corruption. He cared about corruption in Ukraine.
So there he is, summing up in 30 seconds what we just played for 3 minutes before that to set it up so you could hear the actual testimony of Laura Cooper. So there's no disputing that. Let's turn to today. Today was really huge. Yesterday, Gordon Sondland, the ambassador who gave $1 million to Donald Trump, the worst investment of his entire life, I can assure you, to be stuck in the middle of a drug deal, as John Bolton calls it. I call it a criminal conspiracy, and that's what it is. Stuck in the middle of it. Gordon Sondland testifies yesterday very, very clearly. There is zero doubt. He uses the words quid pro quo, and the quid pro quo he was talking about is that the Ukrainians must go to a microphone and announce that they're investigating Joe Biden, or number one, no White House meeting, which is more than like a cute little thing for a new president, as they made the point yesterday and today. That is actually a tangible benefit to make it clear to the world, and especially Russia, that the U.S. is standing with Ukraine. Number one, that. Number two, as Sondland testified, that the military aid was also withheld until they went to a microphone and announced an investigation. Now, at the second point, Sondland was slightly less convincing in terms of giving us evidence to believe that, but it's something I said yesterday, and we'll talk about it more today. Gordon Sondland is protecting somebody. I speculated that yesterday on air. We talked about that. I also yesterday said I did not believe for a second that Gordon Sondland for months was talking about the word Burisma, which he talked about at least in July at a meeting July 10th in the White House, through September. And then finally in September, he connects Burisma with Biden. Like, Burisma is like a magical fun word. Like, Burisma, sure, I'll just keep saying Burisma all the time and not ask anyone, why does Trump keep talking about Burisma? Well, wouldn't you, if you were a normal person and someone says to you, your number one priority is to get an investigation into Burisma, and you didn't know what Burisma is, you're a smart person. You'd ask someone, what's Burisma? And they tell you it's the Biden company. So he pretended he didn't know it. Completely incredible, unbelievable. So it shows me that Gordon Sondland is still protecting someone. He threw Rudy under the bus in his opening testimony. I believe he's protecting Donald Trump, and we'll go through some of the testimony today on that, on Fiona Hill. I can't prove that, except we have Donald Trump in his July 25th confession asking for an investigation into Joe Biden. But here is Fiona Hill. We had two people testify today. Fiona Hill, the former senior director for European and Russian affairs on National Security Council, and David Holmes. And we'll go through first with Fiona Hill, a bunch of her stuff, and then we'll go to David Holmes. We'll do it separately so it's completely clear for everyone exactly what happened. First of all, Fiona Hill was remarkably great. Oh my gosh. Plus, she's got a British accent. The minute I heard the British accent, I tweeted, Republicans, good luck undermining that. You're going to lose. She got crushed. It was, oh my God. And Jim Jordan especially, and Devin Nunes is just a joke. So let's play some of the clips here. Fiona Hill begins her testimony, Dr. Fiona Hill begins her testimony by first, in her opening statement, destroying this right-wing conspiracy created by Vladimir Putin that the Ukraine attacked our 2016 election. Just so it's clear, there is zero evidence, zero, none, done, nothing, that the Ukraine attacked our election. If the Ukraine had attacked our election, Donald Trump controls the national intelligence apparatus of our government. We would have the FBI or CIA or Director of National Intelligence or somebody backing up. Nobody is, because there's nothing there. They've literally made this myth up, and they keep spinning it and spinning it. I guess just like, was it Stalin or Goebbels say a lie enough, people start believing it, that kind of idea. Fiona Hill begins her testimony by destroying the idea that Ukraine, and by the way, Fiona Hill's not a liberal. She was working for John Bolton. Bolton's a right-wing hawk. He gave us the Iraq War. She was hired by him. So here's Fiona Hill, clip number 4.
This relates to the second thing I want to communicate. Based on questions and statements I've heard, some of you on this committee appear to believe that Russia and its security services did not conduct a campaign against our country, and that perhaps, somehow, for some reason, Ukraine did. This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated by the Russian security services themselves. The unfortunate truth is that Russia was the foreign power that systematically attacked our democratic institutions in 2016. This is the public conclusion of our intelligence agencies, confirmed in bipartisan congressional reports. It is beyond dispute, even if some of the underlying details must remain classified.
Boom. Bye-bye, Ukraine. It won't stop them. They continue to bring it up during the hearing because facts, what's nice about the Republicans, they don't let facts get in the way of spinning a tale of lies. It's remarkable. Facts don't matter. I don't care. I've got a story. I'm going to keep telling it over and over and over. It doesn't really matter. Now, here is where Fiona Hill talks about Gordon Sondland. I should call her Dr. Hill, out of respect. I will try to remember that. Here's Dr. Hill talking about Gordon Sondland and about her being upset with him. They're working together. It's June and July. And Sondland's keeping her and John Bolton, her boss, out of the loop. And she goes, what's going on? Who put you in charge of Ukraine policy? And she tells us right here, Gordon Sondland said, Donald Trump put me in charge of Ukraine policy. So here's clip number 5.
This was after Ambassador Yovanovitch had been pushed out of her position. And it was at that juncture that Ambassador Sondland's role seemed to grow larger.
And did you express any concerns to him directly?
I did express concerns to him directly.
What were those concerns?
I asked him quite bluntly in a meeting that we had in June of 2019. So this is after the presidential inauguration, when I'd seen that he had started to step up in much more of a proactive role on Ukraine. What was his role here? And he said that he was in charge of Ukraine. And I said, well, who put you in charge, Ambassador Sondland? And he said, the president.
Did that surprise you when he told you that?
It did surprise me. We'd had no directive. We hadn't been told this. Ambassador Bolton had never indicated in any way that he thought that Ambassador Sondland was playing a leading role in Ukraine.
Now, Gordon Sondland also, and we could talk about this later in the show, told Ambassador Bill Taylor and Tim Morrison, also worked National Security Council, that he was speaking to Donald Trump and he was doing the work of Donald Trump. Some might try to create distance between Trump and Sondland and say, well, Sondland was making this up and he was on some rogue operation. That doesn't make sense. The guy ran hotels in the Northwest. He was not a political operative. He was a guy who wanted to be an ambassador. Second of all, do you want to know how close Donald Trump and Gordon Sondland are? Gordon Sondland sat at a table in the Ukraine having a lunch, picks up his cell phone, calls Trump unscheduled, and Trump takes the call. Presidents don't do that unless you have something really important, like you're working on something extremely important. Presidents don't just take random unscheduled calls from ambassadors around the world. I can assure you that's not happening. That's how close they were. That's how close Sondland was working with Donald Trump. It wasn't like every day, but this was a priority to Donald Trump. This criminal conspiracy to get the Ukraine to help Donald Trump win in 2020, the way he got Russia to help him in 2016, was a high priority at the time. And then here's I think such a couple next clips I'll play I think are really important. And that is Dr. Hill talking about, it was very clear Gordon Sondland, his focus was not mine and John Bolton's focus, which was the national interest of our nation. It was personal to Donald Trump's political fortunes. That's what this was all about. So the biggest takeaway for me, for Dr. Hill, in regards to Trump was that it was very clear to her. She had gotten upset at Sondland and then realized Sondland was telling the truth. He was doing what Trump wanted. So she was wrong to get upset at him. It was more at Trump. And what she saw was Sondland was being used for Donald Trump's political errands. And here's her exact words on that. Let's go to clip number 6, please.
That he wasn't coordinating with us because we weren't doing the same thing that he was doing. So I was upset with him that he wasn't fully telling us about all of the meetings that he was having. And he said to me, but I'm briefing the president. I'm briefing Chief of Staff Mulvaney. I'm briefing Secretary Pompeo, and I've talked to Ambassador Bolton. Who else do I have to deal with? And the point is we have a robust interagency process that deals with Ukraine. It includes Mr. Holmes. It includes Ambassador Taylor as the chargé in Ukraine. It includes a whole load of other people. But it struck me yesterday when you put up on the screen Ambassador Sondland's emails and who was on these emails, and he said, these are the people who need to know, that he was absolutely right, because he was being involved in a domestic political errand. And we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged. So he was correct, and I had not put my finger on that at the moment, but I was irritated with him and angry with him that he wasn't fully coordinating. And I did say to him, Ambassador Sondland, Gordon, I think this is all going to blow up, and here we are.
Those 3 words are so important. Domestic political errand. That's what Gordon Sondland was on. And he was doing Donald Trump's political errand. That was to help Donald Trump in the 2020 campaign, not to help our national interest. It's always about Trump. If any issue that comes up with Trump, trying to figure out what happened, how does it personally help Donald Trump? Look through that prism and you'll find your answer every single time. There's no exceptions. When Donald Trump does something good for the country, I can assure you it just happens to be that it's lining up what's good with him personally. So here's an important thing. July 10th, there's a White House meeting. This is really important. White House meeting, Gordon Sondland's there, John Bolton's there, Dr. Hill is there, and Ukrainian officials are there. And this is the meeting that Sondland says in front of everyone, I got to deal with Mick Mulvaney. We're holding up the aid. Where's the investigations? What's going on? But this stuns Hill and Bolton. They have no idea what's going on. They have inadvertently stumbled into the Donald Trump's domestic political errand / abuse of power / crime. So here is the first part of that. And the idea of Sondland point blank bring up Burisma July 10th. So folks, any doubt Sondland pretending he didn't know what Burisma is, he knows. July 10th, he's talking about Burisma. You don't just randomly bring up one company in Ukraine. You're a smart guy, Sondland. We know that. He started a business. He's a multimillionaire. He knew what this was. Clip number 7.
And so when I came in, Gordon Sondland was basically saying, well, look, we have a deal here that there will be a meeting. I have a deal here with Chief of Staff Mulvaney. There will be a meeting if the Ukrainians open up or announce these investigations into 2016 in Burisma. And I cut it off immediately there. Because by this point, having heard Mr. Giuliani over and over again on the television and all of the issues that he was asserting, by this point it was clear that Burisma was code for the Bidens, because Giuliani was laying it out there. I could see why Colonel Vindman was alarmed, and he said, this is inappropriate with the National Security Council, we can't be involved in this. And I've learned, since from Mr. Holmes's rendition here today, that Colonel Vindman has already warned the Ukrainians, or in fact President Zelensky, no less, to stay out of American politics, domestic politics.
Burisma is code for the Bidens. It's very important that we all know this. In retrospect, everyone knew it. Sondland had to know it. I do not believe for a second he does not know that. In fact, later in her testimony, Fiona Hill point blank says, I do not believe Gordon Sondland did not know that. We all knew Burisma was code. And let's continue with this meeting, because this July 10th meeting is very important. Now here is Dr. Hill talking about Gordon Sondland point blank, saying, we got to deal with the Ukrainians. They're doing the investigation or they're not getting a White House meeting. Clip number 8.
And did Ambassador Sondland say who his agreement on this White House meeting was with?
In that particular juncture, I don't believe so. It was later, which I'm sure you'll want to talk about, that he did say more specifically.
And what did he say later?
Later, he said that he had an agreement with Chief of Staff Mulvaney that in return for investigations, this meeting would get scheduled.
And was he specific at that point later about the investigations that he was referring to?
He said the investigations in Burisma.
The investigation Burisma code for Biden. And there's no doubt the Office of Management and Budget, headed by Mick Mulvaney, he's also acting chief of staff, put a formal hold on that money. It came to everyone's light July 18th in a conference call they had. In reality, we learned last night it actually began in June, at the latest in June. And so here Fiona Hill goes to her boss, her direct report, Ambassador John Bolton, and tells him all of this. And listen to what John Bolton, what he calls this and what he directs us to do. And I can assure you, and we're going to have two people on later in the show, Richard Painter and Chris Liu, who served in two different administrations, one in the Bush administration, one in the Obama administration. And how extraordinary it is, how extraordinary it is that someone would say, go to the lawyers now and report that. That's not normal. That's how stunning and alarming. And John Bolton's been in numerous administrations. So here's clip number 9, Fiona Hill again.
Did you have a conversation with Ambassador Bolton after this subsequent meeting with Ambassador Sondland?
I had a discussion with Ambassador Bolton both after the meeting in his office, a very brief one, and then one immediately afterwards, the subsequent meeting.
So the subsequent meeting, or after both meetings, when you spoke to him and relayed to him what Ambassador Sondland said, what did Ambassador Bolton say to you?
And when I came back and related it to him, he had some very specific instruction for me. And I'm presuming that that's
what was that specific instruction?
The specific instruction was that I had to go to the lawyers, to John Eisenberg, our senior counsel for the National Security Council, to basically say, you tell Eisenberg, Ambassador Bolton told me, that I am not part of this whatever drug deal that Mulvaney and Sondland are cooking up.
What did you understand him to mean by the drug deal that Mulvaney and Sondland were cooking up?
I took it to mean investigations for a meeting.
Did you go speak to the lawyers?
I certainly did.
You relayed everything that you just told us and
I relayed it precisely, and then the details of how the meeting.
So you've got there John Bolton, a veteran of various administrations, going, I want you to go to the lawyers now, and tell them what's going on, and tell them I don't want to be part of this drug deal, meaning he does not want to be a guy testifying in Congress one day about a criminal conspiracy like he's seen other administrations go through. But we are there. But he sent her and wanted to document this to make it clear he was not part of it. He doesn't want to be criminally complicit in this. And there's no doubt in my mind now, September 10th, John Bolton resigns. September 11th, the aid gets suddenly released to the Ukraine. I wonder if Bolton said, I'm leaving and I'm going public with the aid being withheld. But in any event, she goes to John Eisenberg. Who else went to John Eisenberg, National Security Council? Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, after the July 25th phone call, and said, this is so alarming what I heard Trump say. I have to report it. You would say, wow, John Eisenberg is a really important guy. You would love to hear from him to testify, wouldn't you? Because he's going to know a lot of facts here, right? Well, the Democrats subpoenaed him. Who won't let him testify? Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not blocking John Eisenberg because John Eisenberg's going to help Trump. He's blocking John Eisenberg because John Eisenberg's going to add more dirt to Trump's political grave that we're seeing right here being dug, and we're like in Middle Earth at this point. That's where it's going. So that's the main points of Fiona Hill. We'll play a couple more clips of David Holmes, who also testified today, political counselor to the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, which I used to call Kiev, but now it's Kyiv. And He was present. There's only two big things he's here for. He was present at that lunch, having lunch with Gordon Sondland, the ambassador in the Ukraine, and Sondland just picks up his phone, cell phone, calls Trump. Trump picks up the phone. That's how important their relationship is. But it's the conversation they have that Sondland can hear clearly, which makes it directly tied to Donald Trump. That even if we didn't have the Trump confession/transcript, right here you have someone testifying. He heard Donald Trump asking, what about the investigation into Burisma, which is code for Biden? We all know that. So here's David Holmes today. Clip number 10, please.
During the lunch, Ambassador Sondland said that he was going to call President Trump to give him an update. Ambassador Sondland placed a call on his mobile phone, and I heard him announce himself several times along the lines of Gordon Sondland holding for the president. It appeared that he was being transferred through several layers of switchboards and assistants, and I then noticed Ambassador Sondland's demeanor changed and understood that he had been connected to President Trump. While Ambassador Sondland's phone was not on speakerphone, I could hear the president's voice through the earpiece of the phone. The president's voice was loud and recognizable, and Ambassador Sondland held the phone away from his ear for a period of time, presumably because of the loud volume. I heard Ambassador Sondland greet the president and explain he was calling from Kyiv. I heard President Trump then clarify that Ambassador Sondland was in Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland replied, yes, he was in Ukraine, and went on to state that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it, adding that President Zelensky will do anything you ask him to do. Even though I did not take notes of these statements, I have a clear recollection that these statements were made.
And that phone call took place July 26th, the day after Donald Trump talked to Zelensky and said, investigate Biden. Investigate Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and this CrowdStrike server. And then David Holmes continues and said after lunch, he's speaking to Sondland, and he asked him, what's the president's view of the Ukraine? What's the president's priorities here? What's going on? And here is David Holmes' testimony, clip number 11.
I then took the opportunity to ask Ambassador Sondland for his candid impression of the president's views on Ukraine. In particular, I asked Ambassador Sondland if it was true that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. I asked why not. And Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
Big stuff that benefits the president. All roads might lead to Putin, but every single road leads to what helps Donald Trump, what benefits Trump personally. And you hear it over and over from testimony after testimony. There's a through line here. Donald Trump put himself first. He doesn't care what laws he violates, what constitution he destroys, what norms, what checks and balances, what conflicts of interest. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And in Trump's view, he's gotten away with everything. He's born into millions and millions of dollars. He's lived this life of privilege, extreme privilege, and has never been held accountable for any wrongdoing in his life, be it discriminating against African Americans, trying to rent, to calling for the death of the Central Park 5 people who were innocent, the 5 young men, to violating New York State lobbying laws in 2000, where instead of being charged with a crime, he paid a record fine, him and Roger Stone, but I bet he paid Roger Stone's fine, and the Mueller investigation, and anything else we don't even know about. Trump has never paid the price, and here it is right now. This is where we are. It really comes down to so much. It's a domestic political errand. It's what benefits Donald, the president, Donald Trump. It's all about Trump. Sondland is in this. I think Sondland's protecting Donald Trump, but we already have direct evidence. The Republicans will not vote to remove Donald Trump because they're not about what's good for this country anymore, at least the ones in Congress. They're not about holding up the rule of law or the Constitution. They're about making sure they don't get primaried in an election. And before we go to the break, and we'll come back, and I want to hear from you, this is a simple plan. Donald Trump put his personal interests over our national security. Donald Trump put his personal interest over lives in the Ukraine, withholding military aid, which accounted for 10% of their budget, knowing one Ukrainian a week at least are being killed. He did not care about that. He didn't care that Robert Mueller had testified the day before and he gets on the phone with Zelensky. He didn't care about any rule of law. He doesn't care about the idea we should not have foreign interference in our elections. He cares about Donald Trump. And now we're going to close it out here with Adam Schiff, his closing remarks today, right before he ended the public hearings, and his impassioned plea for even Republicans. He was pleading with the Republicans and those undecided to look at the facts, look what's going on. Let's jump all the way to clip number 18, please, Nina.
The day after Bob Mueller testified that Donald Trump invited Russian interference, hey, Russia, if you're listening, come get Hillary's emails, and later that day, they tried to hack her server. The day after he testified that not only did Trump invite that interference, but that he welcomed the help in the campaign, they made full use of it, they lied about it, they obstructed the investigation into it, and all this is in his testimony and his report. The day after that, Donald Trump is back on the phone asking another nation to involve itself in another U.S. election. That says to me, this president believes he is above the law, beyond accountability. And in my view, there is nothing more dangerous than an unethical president who believes they are above the law. And I would just say to people watching here at home and around the world, in the words of my great colleague, we are better than that. Adjourned.
Adjourned. So we're going to take a break, come back. We're going to break it down, but I want to hear from you. I've talked a lot. I played a lot of clips. Let's talk about what you think. What did you hear? Were you impressed by Dr. Hill today, David Holmes? Are you surprised that there's not even one Republican? Will Hurd said today, and this will be the ultimate Republican defense, that he was troubled by it, it was alarming, but not impeachable. That'll be the reasonable Republican defense to all of this. The rest of them, Nunes, Jim Jordan. And what's remarkable, Jim Jordan is so detail-oriented. If you watch his testimony, with the way he questions people, he goes through everything. He knows all the details. That's remarkable that Jim Jordan is so detail-oriented, yet when he was assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State, he didn't know that over 300 young men were sexually abused by their wrestling coach doctor. How does a guy that detail-oriented not know about a widespread sex scandal? This is how morally bankrupt the Republican Party is. That's the best they've got. A guy who was, two people have come forward and said they directly told him about a sexual scandal and abuse, and he turned a blind eye, and others have said he knew about it clearly. And that's the guy they put on the committee. It's not the GOP. It's just the party of Trump, which is a party of no morals, more concerned with protecting Donald Trump than the United States Constitution. It's a sad day. It's not a gleeful day. It's a sad day for this country where we are. And the only chance we have to right this ship is to utterly decimate on November 3rd, 2020, Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And we have to do that for the good of this country and for the good of the Republican Party, like a cancer, cutting it out so that hopefully the good part of the GOP, if there is any left, can reemerge and be a party where we disagree with on things like policy, not on racism and sexism and bigotry and corruption. Let's take a break. I want to hear from you. 866-997-4748. Be right back.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.